Some people seem to learn the rules of social life automatically. Eye contact, small talk, when to speak, when to stay quiet, what's funny, what's too much, how close to stand, how long to hold a hug. Nobody sat them down and explained any of it. They just absorbed it like breathing. Some of us had to study it like a foreign language, memorizing rules other people never had to think about, watching for cues other people generate without trying, translating in real time a social code that was never written down anywhere except apparently everyone else already had the manual. If you've ever left a conversation and immediately replayed it wondering if you got it right, this video is for you.
Welcome to Inside the Pickle Jar, a podcast where we dive into the wonderfully quirky world of neurodiversity. Listen on to Inside the Pickle Jar, where every connection matters, every pickle has its place.
Before we go further, if you've ever struggled to explain to the people you love why social situations leave you so completely drained when they seem perfectly fine, I made something for exactly that. It's a free guide called 4 Things I Need the People in My Life to Know About My Brain. It does the explaining for you so you don't have to find the words yourself. You can grab it from the description below and we'll keep going. I'm Tanya Weaver. I'm a PCC credentialed coach and I'm neurodivergent myself. Today we're getting specific about one of the biggest reasons masking develops in the first place. The unspoken social rules that neurodivergent people are expected to just know without ever being taught. Imagine being handed a board game with no instructions. Everyone else at the table seems to already know how to play. They're moving pieces with confidence, making decisions quickly, occasionally glancing at you with mild confusion when you ask what feels like an obvious question. Why are you asking that? Everyone already knows that. Except you don't. Nobody told you. There was no manual in your box. That's what social life can feel like for a lot of neurodivergent people. Not because we're not paying attention. Usually the opposite is true. We're paying so much attention that we notice everything. But we don't always know which things matter and which things don't, because nobody ever explained the actual rules of the game. Eye contact is a perfect example. Most people learn without ever being explicitly taught a kind of unspoken choreography around eye contact. How much is too much? How little reads as disinterest? How to break it naturally without seeming evasive? Nobody sits a neurotypical child down and gives them a lesson on this. They just absorb it. For a lot of neurodivergent people, eye contact doesn't come preloaded. It has to be learned consciously, often uncomfortably. And even once you've learned the mechanics, it can still feel deeply unnatural every single time. Eye contact is just one rule. There are hundreds of others. Tone of voice, personal space, when a question is rhetorical versus it expects an actual answer. How to know when someone wants advice versus when they just want to vent. The exact threshold between sharing too little and oversharing. Nobody hands you this rule book. You'll find out it exists much later in the same way most neurodivergent people do. Gradually, painfully, through getting it wrong. If you've ever walked into a social situation and felt like you were being evaluated, like there was a test happening that everyone else seemed to know they were taking, except you weren't sure what was being graded. That feeling is not paranoia. It's an actual read of what's actually happening. Social interactions for neurodivergent people genuinely do function like a test, except it's a test where the questions aren't written down. The answer key changes depending on who's grading, and you don't find out you got something wrong until well after you've already submitted your answer. You said the wrong thing, but you don't find out until later from someone's slightly off reaction or from a friend gently telling you that what you said came across differently than what you meant. You missed a social cue, but you don't realize you missed it until the conversation has already moved somewhere uncomfortable. And now you're trying to recover from a mistake you didn't know you were making while it was happening. This is exhausting in a way that's hard to explain to someone who has never experienced it. Most people will get to be present in a conversation. You're present and also running a constant background analysis, parsing tone, monitoring reactions, cross-referencing against every similar situation you've encountered before, trying to determine in real time whether you're doing this right. You're doing social interaction and social analysis simultaneously, while everyone else is mostly just doing the first one. That's an enormous amount of cognitive load for something that's supposed to be effortless. And for a lot of people, it actually is. This is where masking and the unspoken rules connect directly. Once you start to notice, usually through negative feedback, sometimes subtle and sometimes not, that you're getting the rules wrong, you start to develop strategies. Those strategies over time become masking. Conversations get scripted in advance, rehearsed before they happen, so you're not generating responses under pressure in real time. Other people become research subjects, not out of nosiness, but out of necessity, watching how they hold eye contact, how they laugh, how they move between topics, and trying to replicate what seems to work. Anything that has gotten you the wrong kind of attention in the past gets quietly suppressed. Too much enthusiasm, too much honesty, too much intensity, too much of whatever it was that made people look at you a certain way. Little T learned this early. And if you're listening to this on the podcast versus YouTube, I have a cloth doll I call Little T, and she represents the inner child, the version of us who learned to mask early in response to exactly this kind of feedback. And she watched the other kids and tried to copy what worked for them. She memorized scripts for situations she found unpredictable. She learned through years of small corrections and social consequences which parts of herself to keep visible and which parts to tuck away. Masking, as a response to the unspoken rules problem, actually works. It gets you through the test. It reduces the negative feedback. But the cost is that you're now running an entire second curriculum that nobody else has to study for. While everyone else gets to just show up, you have to study the material, take the test, grade your performance afterward, every single time you interact with another person. What happens when the unspoken rules problem shows up, not just in casual social settings, but in the relationships that matter most to you? This is where it gets particularly painful. With a stranger, getting a social rule wrong is uncomfortable, but low stakes. With someone you love, a partner, a close friend, a family member, getting it wrong can feel like evidence that something is fundamentally broken in how you connect with people. You might have been told you come across as too intense in conversations that matter to you, or you've struggled to read when someone else needs comfort versus solutions, and gotten it wrong in ways that hurt the relationship. You've over-explained or under-explained or missed an emotional cue that felt to the other person like you simply didn't care. That doesn't mean you don't care. It means you are navigating an unspoken rule book in real time in a high-stakes emotional context without the manual everyone else seems to have been handed. The people who love you best are often the ones who learn to hand you a version of the manual directly, who tell you plainly, I need reassurance right now, not solutions. Or when I go quiet, it means I need space, not that I'm upset with you. That kind of direct communication isn't a workaround for a deficient relationship. It's actually a more honest and more functional way to connect than the unspoken guessing game most relationships run on by default. If you found people who are willing to write some of those rules down for you, explicitly out loud, that's a sign of a relationship built on actual communication, not assumed mutual telepathy. You were never failing the test. You were taking a test that was never designed for how your brain processes information, while everyone around you had been quietly handing the answer key since childhood, without realizing it was a privilege rather than something universal. The unspoken rules of social life aren't universal truths. They're conventions, patterns that happen to come naturally to neurotypical brains and that get treated as the only correct way to exist, simply because they're the majority pattern. Your brain processes social information directly, not wrong, differently. Your brain processes social information differently, not wrong, differently. The fact that you've spent years learning, studying, adapting, and surviving a social rulebook that was never explained to you is not evidence of failure. It's evidence of extraordinary effort applied to a task that should never have required this much effort in the first place. You were never bad at this. You were just never given the rules. So that's the unspoken rules problem, the invisible test that neurodivergent people take every single day with no manual, no answer key, and consequences that show up only after the fact. If this resonated with you, if you recognize the exhausting background analysis, the rehearsed conversations, the masking that developed in response to all of it, none of it makes you bad at being a person. It makes you someone who has been working incredibly hard at something that was never explained to you properly. If you haven't already, grab the free guide in the description below. 4 things I need the people in my life to know about my brain. It might be the thing that starts one of the harder conversations with someone you love. And if you're still wondering why social situations leave you so completely depleted, even when nothing dramatic happened, this video right here is a great one to watch next. It's called The Hidden Cost of Masking as a Neurodivergent Adult. It explains exactly what's happening beneath the surface. So be gentle with yourself, pickle friend. Please subscribe, like, and share. And I'll see you next time inside the pickle jar.